Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The Upside. I'm Jonathan Oleski with JMOR, and this is our virtual show brought to you by the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore and JMOR to keep the entire Jewish community informed during these times of uncertainty. Now, if you would like to ask today's guests questions during the show, please be sure to type them into the Zoom chat or message us via JMOR's Facebook page. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our two outstanding hosts, Beth Goldsmith, Chair of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, and Dr. Scott Rifkin, publisher of JMOR. Beth and Scott, take it away.
Thanks, Jonathan. Welcome to The Upside, everyone. As we all know, Israel is complex, conflicting, and sometimes actually polarizing, but it is always central to our global Jewish identity and a cornerstone of the Baltimore Jewish community. Yet, less than half of Baltimore's Jewish community actually feels that connection to our homeland. And many who do find it challenging to discuss their perspective. In response to these challenges, last year, the Associated formed Insight Israel Forum to provide opportunities for Jewish Baltimore to enhance its knowledge, understanding, and relationship to Israel. Scott, welcome back, and please introduce our guests.
Thank you, Beth. We're excited to welcome Lisa Abrams, co-chair of the Associated's Israel Insight Forum, and Jeffrey Blavatt. And if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong, I apologize, Jeffrey, but executive director of the forum. So thank you for being here. This is really an interesting topic, and I get mixed feelings just from members of my family about how to deal with Israel. And I have a son who is very troubled by the issue of Palestinians in Israel and how they're treated. And it bothers him tremendously. And yet I have completely different perspectives in the family of everything Israel does is right. So it's really an interesting time for you guys to be here. Tell us a little bit about the forum, please.
Well, I'll go ahead. Thank you for having us. The Insight Israel Forum was developed to create a communal space where people could come together and discuss issues relating to Israel, be they political, social, economic, to talk about their own Jewish journey and to really have a civil discourse so we could understand everyone's opinions, like you said, in your family, from the left, from the right, from older generations to younger generations. And there's an educational component to it. It's usually led by a facilitator with identified topics, but it's a small group discussions where people can really not just learn and talk, but really learn to listen and speak civilly.
Very good. Beth, do you want to head off start with the questions? You want me to?
Sure. No, I'd love to jump in because I have a lot of personal, you know how Scott, sometimes you really have a connection to our guests. I have a very strong connection to these guests and to the I can't even say it. Israel Insight Forum. Sorry, because I'm tongue-tied about talking about my own experience with one of the offerings, which is Inside the Middle East, which is taught by my dear friend Avi Melamed. And I know I've been, I think, in 2 through Israel Insight Forum, but many courses with Avi. So I also know that that's just one of the offerings, and we're going to talk about that. This year, I had the privilege of moderating your opening panel with JJ Goldberg from The Forward and Jonathan Tobin from the Jewish News Syndicate. So I want to check in with you about what has been offered, what kinds of things will be offered, and tell us what to expect when we sign up.
Sure. So last year was our first year, and we tried to offer a variety of what we call pods, personal opinion dialogue sessions. And the pods ranged from 4 to 8 sessions, small groups, generally about 8 to 12 people. And they were different. There was Inside the Middle East, as you mentioned, taught by Avi Melamed. There was other pods taught by, now I'm blanking on the person's name. Jeffrey, you can help me out.
Yeah, we had several others. We had the Open Door Jerusalem U line
Right.
led by Dr. Weissman.
Resetting the Table. So different organizations, and we invited Jewish lay leaders for the most part. Jeffrey probably knows the number of people that participated last year. I don't know it off the top of my head, but we had a pretty good.
It was a robust group, Lisa. I would say 400 people in the community participated. And the really exciting number for us was that over 160 participated in 4 or more programs last year.
Yeah, so we were very excited about that. This year we're offering the pods again. We've also expanded to offer e-adventures where we invite people to go on a virtual tour of Israel. We had many over the summer. There's a whole other group starting this fall. We're putting together family fun programs for families with food and Israel culture. And we also have an event coming up right after the Upside today at 1 o'clock. Do you want to tell the details of that, Jeff?
Yeah, it's actually a great, thank you for the dovetail. The program is part of our Be More community pods, and this focuses on the COVID crisis and specifically the 21%. That's the name of the pod group. And it deals with the minority communities in Israel, how they've been impacted, how it is similar and different than the rest of the communities in Israel. And our guest is Geralda Renawi Zawabi, and she is really going to try to give us some of the insights that we need when we're trying to understand the complexity of Israel and the complexity of COVID.
And we've tried really hard to present a variety of speakers so that we have representative from the left, from the right, and everything in between. We've partnered with community groups such as a group with Beth Tefillah, they're Yafi scholars, groups through the JCC, groups through the associated different boards. So we're really trying to open it up to diverse members of the community.
Very good. So what do I say to my son? My son, who is a social activist, is a lawyer who does immigration cases, for the poor, and for the folks who really can't afford a lawyer. And he looks at Israel and he's concerned when it comes to the Palestinians. So how do I address my son on this issue?
That's sort of a loaded question.
No, it's not meant to be loaded. It's really meant to be, I could use the help.
I know. I mean, I think it's difficult. I have 3 sons, and I have one in particular who is very progressive, and the Palestinian situation is very troubling to him. And I think the first thing to do is to be educated on both sides of the issue. I think Inside the Middle East with Avi really gives a very broad perspective of the situation Israel is in and its safety and security. Some of the other pods talk more about the social issues and sort of how Israel got to where it is. But it's a difficult question. I think, only by talking and learning and listening will you ever, be able to come to some sort of, if not agreement, understanding of, where the other side feels. But I can't give you an answer of maybe invite your son to participate in some of the pods. And most of them are almost all are virtual now. So I don't know if he's in Baltimore, but he's certainly welcome to participate.
So it makes
Scott, I would just say you should take some of the pods because you will learn. You will. I mean, that's the whole point of creating this was for exactly the situation you are discussing, whether it's our children or our friends who have different viewpoints than we do. And that's why one of the absolute key pieces of all of this is learning to listen.
Yes.
And I will put a capital L and all caps on the word learning. This is really about people learning the facts of what's really going on so that they can better form their own opinion and better discuss it with others. So it's an ongoing clearly and ongoing. And Avi always says, if you walk away from one of his classes saying, oh my God, it's really complicated, then he has succeeded, because
Right.
that's
Spent a few
that's
days
the
in
point.
Israel with Avi, and I did. I walked away saying, this is ridiculously complicated.
And if you understand that, then it's harder to have a very polarized view. I think once you start to learn all the pieces, it really helps you understand everyone's piece
But
of this
the
puzzle.
question though, Beth, and to our panel, is are we not winning the messaging war to our kids? In other words, the forum, everything you're doing is part of that messaging, attempt. But are we missing on the messaging in a way that has these kids get to an age where they're forming their own beliefs, and they have beliefs that are more in keeping with what we would have hoped for?
I think one of the issues we talked about was a lot of kids get to college where the BDS program is very prominent. There's a lot of anti-Israel sentiment, a lot of anti-Semitism, and they don't understand the complexities of the political or social situation well enough to even understand how to respond or how to speak out. So we are trying to partner more with Hillels and younger community members to help them understand the complexities, and to just be educated so they can respond and not just react emotionally.
Right,
And
that's
Jeff,
messaging
I was
war.
going to say, and we do have other, Jeff, do you want to jump in about the other? We have programming, we
Right.
being the associated, have programming beginning with teens and even earlier, like our Shinshanim. And Jeffrey, you want to fill us in on
Sure.
something?
I think Lisa and you both make great points in response to as far as the quote younger demographic. One of our programs this year is a 5-part series with Open Door, and the title of it is very much on focus here. Where do we belong? And this is for juniors and seniors in high school and freshmen and sophomores in college, meeting them at the mode that they want, which are obviously podcasts. And then we're going to have very candid conversations beyond that. In addition, on the younger cohort, and I give Lisa a credit along with the co-chairs Will Mencken and Tara Frankel, we really are conscious of, for example, the Elijah Cummings Youth Program, the Diller Fellows. This is a first of its kind in the country, where we're going to be working together across ethnic, racial, and religious boundaries and talking about Israel. So not only is this something that's exciting in terms of the community, our Jewish community, but I think this is an opportunity to learn about Israel on the younger side, so to speak, because everyone seems to be getting younger. But the idea here is, and I think the co-chairs were conscious this year of trying to be very intentional about being laser focused on our younger generations. In addition, I like the comment that you made as far as the Hillels. We are going to be actively working, and we have plans to do the Resetting the Table pod that was successful last year, focused on several of the Hillels. So again, Lisa, I think your focus this year going in, there's a lot of work to do, but it's important that we engage on the younger generation.
And also, we really would like to see more parents and children, grandparents and grandchildren in a pod together so that they can talk to each other, listen to each other, learn to understand each other, because I think that's where a lot of families are finding conflict.
And Lisa, that's a great point. I think it was yourself or Tara mentioned how we are going to be having several sessions with the Bagel Boys. And
Right.
Then the follow-up is going to be that the Bagel Boys are going to then engage a relative, either a multi-generation or just a single generation. And that kind of discussion, I think, is an important second step.
Jeff, or Lisa, can you also tell us what other ways? I mean, that sounds like sort of fun. So what other fun activities, how else are we doing this that isn't just classroom type learning?
Well, as you mentioned, we had the community forum that you moderated for us. So that was more of a listening and discussion, although we had a ton of Q&A afterwards. So we've talked about having a sort of book club where a pod or several pods read a book pertinent to Israel. And then we have the author come and speak to the participants. For younger families, we have the Israel Family Food and Fun, which we're working on now, maybe partnering with Pearlstone to create a more cultural experience. And let's see, am I missing anything else, Jeffrey?
No, the one that's we're just going to get off the ground, I think will be really exciting is there are so many Israelis in our community.
Oh,
So
right.
we're partnering with Arab Israeli, which is in essence a group of Baltimoreans that are Israelis, and an opportunity very much to go back to your point, Beth, about just listening and meeting. So we're excited about that after the first of the year. In addition, what we're calling our Wine, Dine, and Dialogue, we think is an opportunity to promote, obviously, Israeli wine and businesses, which I think is an important point as well, but also to have a little bit of fun. And Lisa and Will and Atar all said that we need to have serious conversations. These are complex, like you, Scott, mentioned, but we also need to realize the many, many fun aspects of Israel and engaging, and to look beyond just, the geopolitics.
Right. And the e-adventures also have been really well received. We've had sort of, an architectural tour, the things you kind of expect to see in Israel, but then we've had some really interesting tour guides that share a more personal perspective. We had a Jewish woman of color give a tour that was really interesting. So it's we're just trying to sort of think outside of the box, especially, well, with everything on Zoom and virtual, we're just trying to make it as interactive and multi-layered as possible.
Very good. I think what you guys are doing is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I think as a generation, my generation kind of missed the boat on this stuff, because we all thought that if we sent our kids to Israel, and I forgot what the program is called, where all the kids went to Israel.
Birthright.
They'd all come home from Birthright, loving everything about Israel, and that was enough. And I think we lost that messaging war. And I think it's great what you guys are doing, because we got to, you can't fight the war you're not, you can't win the war you're not fighting.
Exactly. I think, what I learned personally, I consider myself pretty progressive. And when I went to some of these pods with younger people and I started to see their viewpoint and how, it's completely different from anything I expected, it really opened my eyes to how necessary this was, to really see the world through their eyes and have them see it through mine or my parents, because it's so different what we learned about Israel, what they're learning about Israel. And they're so much more savvy and, have so much more access to the news and to different, whether they're valid or not, political opinions. And we're fighting all of that to try to wade through into the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to raise your children as social liberals.
Yeah.
And then expect them to see the world as social liberals. And it's obviously a much more complicated picture, but I don't know that they got that part of the message. So I think
that's a great point. What Lisa was saying about the pods, our assessment last year of the participants really did confirm what we were trying to do in terms of three major areas. Promoting respectful conversations, 97% agreed with that. Provided some new information about Israel, 90% mentioned that. And then also that I thought was what to your point, Scott, gave them the skills and understanding the complexities, and over 85% mentioned that. So we have lots of work to do, but I think we're very conscious about trying to do something that's an individual Jewish journey. We're not here for advocacy, and we should be clear about that. We're not about organizations. Lisa and the co-chairs, I think, in very much modeling what we're trying to do. They're on their own Jewish journeys, and the three of them have really had the opportunity to, and we've shared our experiences and done, a mini book read and other things. So I think that's important to remember, that this is very ongoing, but very individual.
Very good. Very good. Programs upcoming, things that you want to tell us about. This is your chance. We get a pretty good audience. Several thousand people watch this every week, either on YouTube or on Facebook, all those social media things that I'm too old to have. But we get a good, viewership. So what are the things you want to promote today that would, you could reach out to the audience about?
Well, one thing upcoming, we mentioned the event that is right after this today. On December 6th, we have a e-adventure trip with the Baltimore Ashkelon Partnership. So it will be a virtual tour of Ashkelon with an Israeli tour guide. That's at 10 a.m. It'll explore the history and archaeology of Ashkelon, as well as contemporary living in Ashkelon. Jeffrey, do you want to give out the information for our webpage so people can go and see more and anything else coming up?
Well, sure. And the other thing I would mention, Lisa, is our Table Talk Yerushalmi series continues. Okay. And this is something on a smaller scale. Again, Lisa and the co-chairs were very, I think, intentional about this. It's a smaller sized experience, and it's a chance, as the name suggests, to sit down at the virtual kitchen table and have a conversation with interesting Israelis. And November 17th, our next one is about modern Israel, the founding fathers. And we're featuring Yuri Bachrach, who literally was rubbing shoulders and giving advice on Israel's nuclear program to Israel's founding fathers. And then we have a little bit more lighthearted one. Lisa and I have been kidding about this one. It's a pickle prohibition. It's illicit delicacies. It's having a little bit of fun about with Chaim Davids, who's actually from Baltimore, and about his experience in terms of bootlegging in the Judean hills and the local markets as far as the pickle industry in Israel. So those are, again, a little bit of fun, a little bit of lighthearted.
Wait. You can't just throw that out. There's bootlegging of pickles?
Well, you'll have to tune in for more details.
That's hilarious.
But Scott, I guess the point we're trying to make with these type of maybe smaller size programs, as great as the larger panel discussions that like Beth moderated, or even some of the larger community conversations we've had partnering with the Baltimore Jewish Council, with David McCoskey and others, those are great, but this is another smaller sized opportunity. And again, Lisa, I would encourage people, there's still e-adventures happening throughout the course of this month and next, that they can join the diversity of Israel. Here's an interesting one, Scott, the holy city of Tel Aviv and modern Israeli politics, as well as one on ecology and sustainability.
Very good.
And I jump in with, I love hearing, number one, Lisa, thank you for mentioning Ashkelon. Of course, I wanted to bring that up at some point and talk about our partnership there, and to sort of further elucidate what you guys are mentioning about really getting to know Israelis and how important that is. So whichever one of you wants to jump in, or both of you want to sort of talk to that.
Well, that's a little bit newer this year. As Jeffrey mentioned, there is a sizable Israeli population in Baltimore, so we want to partner with them to do something that's more on the sort of cultural side and to get to know them. We've had some Zoom seminars with the people of Ashkelon, especially during the quarantine, discussing about what our different experiences were like during that time in the spring. As I mentioned, there's the e-adventure with Ashkelon coming up on, as I say, November 17th. Anything else, Jeffrey?
I would just mention that some of the other programs, for example, in particular, the e-adventure that mentions the diversity of Israel. It was very popular this summer. We met a variety of people, and candidly, because there was so much interest, we have that series coming up beginning next week, November 19th. And it shows everyone from a Yemenite jewelry person and business to a variety of others, some in the technology industry. So we're really meeting people from a very diverse group. I will give you one example. And Lisa, I remember we talked about this on this past, to understand Israel, you need to understand the region. We were on our e-adventure with Ami Malamed, and we were at the Golan Heights, and we had a live interview with Boz. And I must admit, I forget his last name, but he explained why he lives there, the implications of living there. But most importantly, he's also a guitar manufacturer. He makes his own guitars. The reason I mention this is he actually played several songs for us. So we started in a very intense geopolitical discussion in the first hour of the e-adventure. And then we ended up, all the participants, we had over 60 participants, just having a conversation, listening to music. It was very surreal in that sense, but we got to meet Boz and really experience his life and understand the implications of living on the Golan Heights and all the advantages of the opportunities that he's made for himself with his business.
Very good, very good. It's fascinating when you actually get to know another culture. And my story like that is, and I think Avi was with us when we were there in Israel with one of the missions from Associated, where we went to and had dinner with Palestinians in Ramallah, a group of Palestinian business folks in Ramallah. And what was most striking was the complete 180-degree difference in narrative. Same basic events and a completely different narrative. And you learn what the perspective of this other group of human beings are. And it was really we weren't going to agree on a lot of stuff, but it was just fascinating. So it's interesting you mentioned that experience with the guitar maker. It's the same kind of thing. Neat stuff. So Beth, other questions you've got?
Well, I'll turn it over to you guys to talk a little bit about it, and then maybe I'll mention it also in closing. They both said, or at least I know at least one of you mentioned, that this was a brand new initiative, not just new for the Associated. It was sort of 2 years in the making before its launch. But I just want to emphasize to people who are watching, this is unique. This is the first of its kind, really, in the nation for Baltimore to have come up with this. We are just very, very excited about it. And it is only one piece of our bigger Israel and overseas package. Many of you probably know we have Shinshanim, emissaries, young people from Israel who teach. So your children may know them. And so we are sort of coming at the understanding Israel and the importance of that understanding and connection from young children all the way up to, the people tuning into our programs of all ages. So I would turn it over to you two to just ask if there's anything else you want to say, and to please, Jeffrey, give everyone the information as to how they can connect.
Well, I appreciate that, Beth. Thank you. I think one of the important things to understand when we were creating this, because we had no model and we had to first define what we wanted to do and why we wanted to do it. And what was important to all of us was that the program was based on the idea that we all love Israel and feel that Israel is important to our identity as Jews. And then from that starting point, understand the complexities of all the challenges and, everything that we, may have differing opinions on, but the foundation is the most important thing, and that is that Israel is important to us, and we want to share that love and just share that willingness to understand.
Very good.
Great point, Lisa. I would say only two other things to add. One is that we really have been looking for platform partnerships and working with our agencies of the Associated. And of course, we're part of the entire community planning allocations Israel and overseas team, which is so helpful and beneficial both to lay and professional leaders in this area. So we are very excited for some of the examples that Lisa outlined in terms of working with the Israel and overseas team. And the other thing I will admit a little bit of bragging is that we've been contacted by 4 or 5 communities already since the e-adventure started saying, well, I know everybody's doing this type of programming. What makes this different? Why are you getting so many large numbers? And I would say it's something as simple as we're very conscious that it's live from Israel, which is different. A lot of times people have taped experiences, and the fact that the guides and educators are very familiar to our community. Actually, one of our best guides, Lisa, was able to refer to us that led her family group on a mission. So those two things allied with the fact that we have an incredible team in Baltimore working on a variety of issues, like you mentioned, Beth, with the Shinshanim, as well as many other outreach efforts. So I think this is very, very much a Baltimore team effort, and that's what's making an impact here as Lisa and Atara and Will continue to lead the forum.
Very good. And contact information?
Sure, we'll go ahead and put that in the chat, but I encourage people to email or phone me or the contact of the Associated's website, Inside Israel Forum there. And I would say that the best thing you can do is it's an opportunity as your Jewish journey is unfolding, whatever time or place works for you. Our programs, as I mentioned, have a diverse schedule intentionally so that people can participate at their leisure. And as well, we record most of our programs, so feel free if you want to, quote, try one out, let us know.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being here. Beth?
Yeah, I just want to thank you both. So, my little personal thing is I've known Lisa since she was 5. I was actually a counselor at Camp Milldale and she was in my bunk.
Oh, okay,
So,
wait, stop right there. Lisa, what kind of a counselor was she? You like her as a counselor? You didn't. Let's hear it.
Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Lisa. We can't hear you.
I think she's saying positives though.
Did you mute yourself on purpose?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so let me wrap it up. So thank you, Lisa and Jeffrey. You know how much I love working with you, and we have a sort of mutual admiration society that has been ongoing for a number of years. And Jeffrey has 2 wonderful little boys that I call them the little presidents because their names are Jackson and Carter, and we do expect great things from them as they grow. So I want to thank you both so much for being here with us today, for taking the time, and for everything you do. The program's amazing, and I think will only get stronger and better as it moves forward. And I want to say to everyone listening, watching, once again, here's how to get in touch. Go to associated.org/Inside Israel Forum. That's no spaces, just Inside Israel Forum. Or you can go, obviously, to associated.org and look up under our Israel and overseas stuff on our website. And I hope everyone watching has learned something and passed this on, because especially now that we're virtual, there's lots of room in our e-adventure bus or on our bus. So thank you again. And I hope our watchers will also join us next week. We'll be back on November 17th for another great conversation. In the meantime, visit jmoreliving.com or associated.org for more information, stories, and resources. Sign up for the weekly newsletter. And until we see you all again, please stay well.
Thanks.